How's it going, guys? My name's Evan, and welcome to episode 29 of my poker vlog. We're here at Horseshoe Casino for the Close2Broke Wolfgang meetup game. Should be a lot of fun. There's over 140 people on the wait list, so it should be a lot of action today. I'm going to be buying in for the max of 500, and with that being said, let's get into it. We get seated at a very action-packed table. There's been a lot of big raises so far, so when we look down at pocket aces in the cutoff, and there's a raise to 10, and a call from the player to my right, I decide to use a pretty big 3-bet size here. I make it 50 to go. I'm looking to get this pot heads up, and that's exactly what happens as the initial raiser calls and the player to my right folds. We see a flop heads up that comes jack high rainbow. She checks it to me, and I decide to continue for $50. After about 20 seconds of thinking, she elects to make the fold. Nice to get going in the right direction, and I don't mind my bet on the flop here with aces, but ideally I'd like to mix in some checks here for deception. About an hour of nothing goes by before we pick up ace-king suited. I'm in the cutoff again. There's an under-the-gun raise to $15. It folds to me, and I like to 3-bet it to $50 again here. It folds back to the initial raiser, who elects to make the call. We see a fantastic flop heads up that comes king 6-4 with 2 hearts. He checks it, and I like to bet $50 here, and now he check raises me to 140. It's a very interesting line by him because he only has another 130 behind. I think it's okay to just put him all in here, but in the moment I liked it to just make the call because I wanted to keep all his bluffs in. The turn comes a pretty neutral card. It comes the queen of diamonds. It shouldn't change much unless he was raising with exactly king-queen here. On this card, he goes all in for his remaining 130. At this point, there's just too many draws that he could have here, and if he has pocket 4s or pocket 6s, so be it. I like to make the call, and the river is a pretty gross card. It comes the 10 of hearts. I show my hand, and he ends up showing ace-king of clubs. So we're going to chop this pot up. Kind of uneventful, but I'm still happy with how I played this hand. Something I've been working on is not overfolding to aggression, and I'm happy I didn't fold here what ended up being a chopped pot. Here in the big blind, we pick up ace-queen offsuit. There's a raise to 15 from middle position. The button makes the call, and when it folds to me, something I've been working on is 3-betting more, and this is a great position to do so. If I just make the call, I'm going to have flopped 3 ways out of position, but if I 3-bet here, I could potentially take the pot down now or get this heads up. So that's what I do. I make it 50 to go. Middle position elects to fold, and the button folds as well. I know this wasn't a big pot, but it's nice to highlight some of the situations I've been working on. But now let's get into the real big pots. A little later, Wolfgang joins our table, and unfortunately did not get into any hands against him. And over the next 2 hours, my stack drops to around 380 before the last hand Wolfgang plays at our table is quite the hand. Here in the big blind, we look down at pocket jacks. There's a raise to 15 from middle position. The cutoff calls, Wolfgang on the button calls, and now the small blind 3-bets it to 75. As mentioned before, I only have about 380 in my stack right now, so I decide to go through my options. I don't like just calling here because when other players call behind, any ace, king, or queen high board, we're most likely going to have to fold to a bet. Folding here is okay facing so much aggression, but the small blind is a good player that's been 3-betting a lot. And on top of that, folding is kind of boring. Now if we decide to go all in and everyone folds, we take down over $100 in dead money without seeing the flop. But on top of that, if we only get a call by one player after going all in, we most likely have a decent chance of winning the pot still. So if calling's the wrong option and folding is boring, I think that leaves one option.
All in.
After I go all in, the initial raiser from middle position goes deep in the tank. At this point, I'm rooting for a fold, but we do get some kind words from Wolfgang in the meantime.
This guy is too good for me. I have to leave.
I am more than flattered, Wolfgang. but I'm gonna have to disagree with you on this one. After a little more thinking, the initial raiser eventually decides to fold. The cutoff and Wolfgang on the button both fold quickly, and now it's on the small blind. He doesn't snap call, which is nice, but he's getting a decent price to make the call here. So after a little bit of thinking, he elects to make the call. Now before we announce our hands, we agree to run it twice. I'm expecting to be flipping, but it turns out we're in really good shape as the small blind ends up having pocket tens. The first board comes out queen 9-8 with 2 diamonds. The turn's a queen, and the river's an ace. So we're guaranteed to at least win half this pot. The second board comes out 9-8-5 with 2 clubs. The turn is a 10. Oh my goodness. And the river is a 4. We were so close to scooping this pot, but unfortunately, we're gonna chop it up. After the hand, it turns out the initial raiser folded ace-king offsuit. So although it ended up being a chopped pot, I'm happy with my decision to go all in. At this point, Kieran, aka Close2Broke, joins our table, and I'm a little tired of chopping pots, so let's try to win one instead. Here I'm under the gun +1 and look down at ace-king offsuit. There's a raise to 20 from under the gun. I go ahead and 3-bet it to $50. It folds all the way back to him, and he elects to make the call. Now the flop, it's almost too good. It comes king 5 rainbow. When he checks it, I decide to check it back for deception. The turn comes the 7 of hearts. He checks it again, and now it's time to start building a pot. I decide to bet 50, and as you see, he calls very quickly. The river comes the 4 of diamonds. He checks it to me, and I only have about 225 left in my stack at this point. With how quickly he called my turn bet, I don't want to just bet small. Let's go for glory. Plus, going all in here kind of looks like a bluff since I checked flop. So that's what I do. I go all in, and he thinks about it for a sec, says something along the lines of, "I'm probably beat, but I have to call," and makes the call. It ends up being a really big cooler, as he ends up showing king jack. So we both flop trips, but my ace plays. It's nice to finally win a big pot, instead of chopping it. As you can see, the very next hand, I'm under the gun and look down at pocket kings. There's a $10 button straddle, both the blinds decide to fold, and when it gets to me, I elect to make it 35 here. It folds back to the button straddler, who elects to make the call. We see a flop heads up that comes 6-5 deuce with 2 clubs. Now this player was betting a lot when checked to, so I decide to slow play my hand. I check it to her, and she bets 30. Now here's where I made the mistake. In the moment, I was planning on check raising turn, but the problem with that is there's a lot of turn cards that are either going to leave us confused on where we are in the hand, or slow down the action. I elected to just make the call here, and the turn card comes the worst card in the deck. I'll let you think about it for a sec, but it's kind of obvious. The turn card comes the ace of clubs. I check it to her, and this time she bets 60. It's kind of a weird spot since I'm holding the king of clubs, but I'm just very confused on where I'm at in the hand, and I just feel like I'm most certainly behind. So for that reason, I decided to make the fold. Looking back, as mentioned, check raising flop here just makes a lot more sense. And later when she left the table, she was nice enough to share with me that she did in fact turn a pair of aces, and she doesn't remember her second card, but it was a club. Oh well, but this next hand is pretty wild. Only a couple hands later, I'm on the button and look down at ace jack of diamonds. There's a couple limps before it gets to me. I make it 15 to go, and we end up getting called by the small blind under the gun and middle position. We end up going to a flop 4 ways that comes ace jack 8 rainbow. We flop top 2 pair. Even better, under the gun, who's the same player from last hand, decides to lead out here for $25. Middle position calls the 25, and when it gets to me, I'm not going to make the mistake of slow playing my hand anymore. I make it 75 to go. But then when it gets over to the small blind, she does something very unexpected. She doesn't call, and she doesn't fold. She goes all in, and she easily has me covered here. Under the gun folds, and now when it gets to middle position, something weird happens with him. He decides to try to call the 75 because he didn't realize the small blind went all in. It takes some time for the dealer to explain to him that the small blind went all in and he can either go all in or fold himself. After a little bit of discussion, middle position decides to go all in as well. His all in is for less, about 285 total. When it gets back to me, we really don't have much of a decision here. I'm not really worried about what middle position could have, and I haven't seen the small blind play too many hands, but she definitely seems capable of bluffing. If she has a hand like pocket eights here, so be it, but I'm just never folding. I decide to make the call, and after I make the call I ask the small blind if she has pocket eights, and interestingly enough she shakes her head no. So I'm not really sure what cards I need to avoid on the turn and river, but I'm not trying to slow roll anyone, I just show my hand. The turn comes the 9 of clubs, and the river comes the 8 of spades. The small blind is slow to show her hand, but eventually shows ace king. Middle position ends up showing ace 5 of hearts, so we're going to end up winning the biggest pot of my life. I cannot believe middle position went all in there as well, and as you're going to see, my hand was shaking trying to get a tip together for the dealer. I was in so much shock. Here we look down at king queen offsuit. I'm under the gun +1. There's a $10 button straddle. Under the gun calls the straddle. I do as well. I wish I raised it, but I think I was just still in shock from that previous hand. Two other players make the call, and the button checks her option. We see a flop 5 ways that comes jack 5-5. Under the gun checks, I check, and it checks through. The turn comes the queen of clubs, and when under the gun checks, I decide to bet 20 here, looking to get value from any flush draws. Both the player to my left and the player to her left make the call. We see a river 3 ways that comes the 7 of diamonds. I decide to check it here, and now the player to my left bets 40. The player to her left folds, and when it's back to me, thinking over my options here, it is possible that she could have rivered a flush, but she did just lose a big pot to me, plus I'm kind of at the top of my range here. For that reason, I like to make the call. She announces a queen, I show my hand, and she ends up showing queen 10. So we just have her out kicked here, and drag another nice pot towards the end of the session. Unfortunately, I didn't get into any hands against Kieran, and after about 20 minutes, our table starts to break and we go down to playing 4-handed, so I decide to rack up and hit the cage. So we were in for 500, out for 1625 for a profit of 1125 over about 5 to 6 hours of play. I am speechless. That was just an insane ending. I got extremely lucky and just dragged some huge pots towards the end of the night. I'm gonna make sure to link every single vlogger from this game in the description below, so make sure you check out their channels. And with that being said, I'll see you in the next one.